I'm Tony, and today we're going to make a syringe block, also known as the shot block. I love this block. It is a foundation paper piece block. You can get this pattern for $2 off of my website. The link is down below. And this tutorial is going to take you step by step of exactly how to make this block, how to resize the block into different sizes, and finishing it off. So let's get started. Step number one, whenever we are making our blocks, is of course our fabric selections. Now this is the first fabric selection that I did whenever I made my my sample to make sure that my pattern was good. You notice in here, of course, I noticed this right away, and you may or may not have noticed the syringe part is a little off to the right. So I didn't quite center that up right. I could take it apart and redo it. I just didn't feel like it. It's fine for now. But we'll make sure when we get to that step for the block today that I show you how to make sure that it is centered up correctly, and it's fine. For the fabric colors I chose today, I decided instead of the purple background, I'm going to go with a green background. Of course, for the actual syringe itself, I'm keeping white. And then, of course, the stopper right here, I have the black. The metallic needle part, I've got the gray. And then the blue, I figured, you know what, I wanted to go a more traditional bright blue. And I think the bright blue looks nicer against that green than the light blue. So I went with a bright blue for that. So on my directions, you want to print out your directions. I'm actually not going to change anything. If I was changing any of these colors, I would actually write it in here for what I was doing with those. And so, you know what? No, I may get confused. I'm going to do that. So instead of purple, green. There you go. I've written it in there. Everything else is good to go, and the colors are the same. You also want to print out your last page that has the actual block. It says on here, shot block. I have printed mine onto foundation paper piecing paper. It's a little bit thinner and lighter weight than a regular paper, although you can use regular paper. The trick is making sure that you drop your stitch length to 1.6. Whether you're using the foundation paper piecing paper or regular paper, dropping it down to 1.6 will perforate the paper enough to where you can easily fold and pull it out. Now, once you print this out, we want to measure to make sure that our block is correct. I am making my syringe block at 100%, so I want my finished block to be a 6.5 by 6.5 with seam allowances. So when I measure it, this right here should be 1 inch. If you want to make your syringe block a different size, you just need to print this a different size, or copy it on a Xerox machine a different size. For example, if I wanted to make this a 12 inch by 12 inch, well then we're going to double this. So instead of a 1 inch, this will be a 2 inch. If we want to make it a 3 inch by 3 inch block, well then we want to shrink it by 50%. And instead of 1 inch, we want this at a 1/2 inch. If you have problems doing the math and figuring out what size block you have, just comment on my finished tutorial video down below, and I'd be more than happy to do the math for you. Just let me know what size you want as the finished block, and I'll do that math for you, and we can get that done. All right, so after you print this out, you want to make sure that you cut these out. Do not cut along the dotted lines. Cut just outside the dotted lines, because our dotted lines are going to be our square up lines. So just outside of these. There we are. Alright, so I've got my papers. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to lay my papers out up here, and I'm going to lay them out one at a time. Because then as an organization tool that I'm going to do, as I'm cutting out my fabrics, I'm actually going to lay the fabrics depending upon what they are with the things. So for example, my green background, my A2 piece, is a 1.5 by a 2.5 inch piece that I need to cut. So I'm going to take that green fabric, and I'm going to put it over here right on top of my A unit. And that is going to keep all of the fabric organized, and I know it's going to be done correctly. The other organizational thing I'm going to do as I'm cutting my fabric is I'm going to take my pen and I'm going to mark off on my checklist that yes, I've cut these pieces. I find that because there's so many pieces in some of my patterns, I confuse myself sometimes. Now, you don't need to do what I do and cut everything all at once. You can just take one of the units, cut the fabric for that unit, and then place it in as you're going. Okay, so it's completely up to you and how you want to organize it. So the next step that I am going to do is I'm going to cut all of my fabrics in the pieces that it's saying I need to cut it in. I'm going to lay them all out in the areas that I told you I was going to do. I'm going to speed all this up, and then we'll come back and I'll show you how to start assembling them. All of our fabric is out, so let's start assembling. So we're going to start with our A1 block. Our A1 is our light blue block. So I'm going to go ahead over here. Now, I like to use water-soluble glue, English paper piecing glue, actually, to put this first one on. It really makes sure that it stays on nicely, and it doesn't move once it's on there. Whenever you add on your fabric to your paper, make sure you're putting it together wrong side to wrong side, because remember, this is mirrored because this is your actual design that we are creating on here. So what we want to do is we want to take this and we want to glue that on there, and we're going to fold this between A1 and A2. Now, if you really want to use pins to hold this in place, you can. It is perfectly fine. Where is, oh, there it is. I just like to use the glue because it makes it easier for this step. So we want to fold it back between A1 and A2 so that we can see our fabric. And then we're going to trim this 1/4 inch away from our fold. We're going to open this back up, and then we're going to take our A2 fabric, and we're going to place it down right side to right side, and then we're going to pin it in place. Just like this. And that is how you pin your paper, pin your fabric. So let's do the same thing with block number, unit number B. Same exact thing. B1 is our blue fabric. So we're going to take our glue and put it over B1. We're going to place this, we're going to center it in the B2 area. Fold this back between B1 and B2, right along that line. I'm going to trim this 1/4 inch from the edge. Open it back up. Take our B2 fabric. Sorry, I forgot to put my A fabric back again. We're going to lay this down right side to right side. Pin the fabric. Now, you can use the water-soluble glue for this step. Just place it right along the edge. There you go. Place it right along the edge whenever you're putting your fabric down. And then we're putting that back. And then here's our C unit. Are you getting a feel of this? So we want to make sure that we start with our 1 block and then add on the 2. So I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing for C, D, E, and F. Placing the 1 block down, folding it over, trimming it, and then pinning on the second one. We're going to speed this up and we'll come back and I'll show you how to sew them. Alright, we have all of our units together. We have the A1 and the A2 blocks ready to go. So now what we're going to do is we're going to sew again with a 1.6 stitch length along this area right here. So we're going to start out here past where the dotted line is, and we're going to continue on at least a 1/4 inch beyond. Because whenever we go to lift this paper out of there and fold it in order to move it around, we don't want the stitches to come undone. Another strategy some people do is they start right at the line and they backstitch and then move forward. That's fine, but it's a little bit harder when you backstitch to take your paper out, which is why I like to go a 1/4 inch before and a 1/4 inch after to make it easier. So we'll do it exactly like this. So I'm just going to start it right here. And I'm going to go out about a 1/4 inch. Let me clear my scrap out of there. And then we're going to pull this away and then trim it. Just like that. So we've got that sewn in there. So let's go ahead and sew the rest of these. Are, and this is all you're doing is sewing between the 1 and the 2 for all of them. Oops, this one's going to be a little bit longer because our D is our big piece. All the way down. Perfect. And then our E. Now, after we finish sewing these, the next step I'm going to show you is how to iron them. Because you want to make sure... Oh, there's my 1 and my 2. I'm like, where's that 1 and my 2? It is right here. Now, as you see, I've started it a little bit differently. In this one, I started it from that side, and I'm moving in towards the line between F1 and F2. It was just easier for me to start it that way. So it doesn't make a difference if you start from the edge or if you start down here. As long as you're sewing in a straight line and you do that 1/4 inch on either side, you're fine. So now, let's go ahead and let's show you how we're going to iron these. When ironing these units, I like to first lock in that seam. Now, this is paper, so you may notice your paper is going to curl a little bit. That is perfectly okay. It is not going to hurt the paper. It is not going to hurt your project. And then you want to iron it towards the number 2. So in this case, I ironed it towards F2. So I have my F1 to my F2. And that's it. That's how you iron them. You just lock your seams in and iron towards your number 2. Now the next one we're going to do, we're going to lock it in and iron it towards our number 3. I try to, whenever I write my patterns, I try to always go in order of the numbers. There's a few patterns that I've changed it up after I've created the actual outline that doesn't follow that, like the rupee. But in this case, I am following it along, so you'll always go towards the higher number. But in any case, you're always going to go towards the one you have just added on. The last fabric you've added on, that's what you're going to iron it towards. That just like that. And now let's do our 3s. So we're going to do the same exact thing we did before. We're just going to fold this between A1 and A3, trim it a 1/4 inch, get our A3 fabric, pin it on there, and set it aside for sewing. Just like that. So it's just a rinse and repeat of the same things that we have been doing. So folding, trimming, opening back up, and putting the fabric on. Now remember, if you have organized your fabrics nicely, then you're not going to have any problems at all finding the right fabric to use. Or if you're just doing one unit at a time, that is perfectly okay as well. I like to be efficient with mine and do all of the 1s, all of the 2s, all of the 3s at the same time. Because because it's more efficient when I'm then sewing and ironing, which is why I do it this way, versus what I actually put in the directions, which I say do 1 unit at a time. All right, so at this point, I'm going to go ahead and finish trimming and pinning all of these. And then I'm going to take these all to the sewing machine, iron and sew them, bring them back and iron them. And then we'll stop the speeded up video and take a look at what we've done and do the couple of 4s that we have. Now, some of these are done. The A has a 4th piece. The F has a 4th piece. However, the rest of these are all finished because there's only 3 pieces. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take all of these, I'm going to set them aside, and I'm not going to worry about them. We're just going to worry about the 4s. Now, this is a little tricky, trying to fold this paper back to get to the 4. And in fact, I'm going to get my favorite foundation paper piecing tweezers. These are from Mori Tweezers, the 507s. Got them linked down below. They are fantastic because they're easy to get. Now, what you want to do is we want to open this up all the way to the line. So you want to pull the paper without pulling the fabric and pulling the stitches, the thread. So I'm holding the thread of the stitches and slowly pulling that until I get to that area that I need opened. So we're holding those stitches, making sure they don't come up, and then folding that down. Once you've got that folded down enough, you can take this and fold this over along the line between A4 and A3, 1, and 2. So we're folding that, and then we are trimming this 1/4 inch from the edge, just like that, and then using our A4 piece. So let's line this up. Now remember, whenever we line these up, we want to line them up so they're centered to the rest of it. I'm actually going to pin those seams first, and then pin the edges. So I'm pinning the seam, pinning the edge. Now, and if I were to open this up, it would cover this part completely. So in the instructions, it says, whenever you lay it down, make sure you completely cover that 4th piece, right? All right, so let's do the same thing here. So I'm going to hold the stitches while I'm pulling back the paper. And I'm doing it slowly. There we are. All the way to that line. The line is right here. So then we're going to lay this down. And I'm folding this between F4 and F2, 1, and 3. Folding it down this way. And we're trimming this 1/4 inch from the edge. Opening it back up. And let me show you what I mean for that last one. So because this one's a little wonky because it's the side. So because I know if I were to take this and fold this over just like this, see how it covers all of that paper. So we want to line this up all the way to the right. If I were to line it up here, let's say if I were to line it up like this, and I were to fold this over, it misses this piece of paper right there. So we want to make sure that when we line this up, we line it up in a way so when folded over, it's going to cover our entire piece of paper. So let's go ahead and pin this in place now. And then I'm going to, let's go ahead and sew both of these. I'll iron both of these, and then I'll come back and show you how we're going to trim our units to get ready to sew the units together. If we take a look at all of our units, if you flip it over, everything should be covered for the paper. You shouldn't have any paper showing. If you do, you may have to redo that unit. All right, so let's trim our units. I'm going to be using my straight edge my paper rotary cutter. So I actually have two different rotary cutters. That way I know which one is for fabric, which one is for paper. Whenever you cut paper, it's going to dull your blade. Do not use your regular fabric rotary cutter unless it's on its last legs and you're getting ready to replace it, because then you're going to dull it even more. My suggestion would be have a separate rotary cutter. You can even write with marker on it. You can label it. Do whatever you like to show that it's a different one for paper versus fabric. And there is our F unit. Just like that. So set that aside. So what I'm doing is I'm trimming it. I'm lining up my line along the solid lines, which are right about where those dotted lines are. You can choose to sew right along, you can choose to trim, to cut it right along those dotted lines, or you can do what I'm doing, which is take your straight edge, line it up along the solid lines, and trim it 1/4 inch from there. So this is what we're doing for all 6 units. Oops, I need a bigger straight edge. My little straight edge doesn't like this one. We're doing this for all 6 of the units, trimming all the way around, and then we'll start sewing them together. All right, we have our pieces together. So now I'm going to flip these over so that I can see the letters, because we're going to start assembling this. And what I want to do is, there's our A, B, C, D, E, and F. So we have it all assembled like this. So now I'm going to take this and I'm going to flip this over so that I can see them. Oops, goes that way. Yep, this way. Just like that. And I think, let me check. I think D2, it may be that way. Let me double check my pattern really quickly to see if it's D2, which way D2 and D3 go. It actually goes like this. Great. Okay, and then it is D3, so it is this way. So I was right the first time. So D3 goes on the top, right there. So that is our layout for our shot. All right, let's start assembling this. So let's take the B to the A. Now remember, I said we're going to keep an eye on exactly how to center it. So the easiest way that I center these is look at your lines right here and look at your lines right here. And you want to eyeball this. You can, if you want, take a ruler and line it up to make sure it's perfect, but eyeballing should be fine. So eyeball this to make it there, right there, and pin this in place. So whenever you do that, you want to pin it starting in the center and then move out. So let's pin this here, pin this here. So right there is my center block. So that now I'm going to move out and go here and over here. Now you are going to have what I call wings. So you see how you have little flappies here? You have little wings. It looks like it's a little sailboat. That is perfectly okay. Do not worry about those little wings. All right? All right, so now let's do the same thing for here. So I'm going to take this one. I'm going to flip it over this way. And let's center this. So I'm eyeballing this. That looks about center, just like there. Where my thumbnails are is where the 2 seams are. There. Perfect. Now, again, if you are super super paranoid about it being perfect, get your ruler out, measure it, make sure that it is in fact centered. I'm going to put another one in the center right here just for good measure. And then let's come out here and pin that. And pin this one. Perfect. All right, so there's that one. Now for this one, same exact thing. So I'm going to take this, I'm going to flip it over this one, and center. Just like that. I like it. I like it. And I'm going to do a close-up shot to show you the centered portion of it. There we are. And then I will show you how we sew these. All right, so let's do our close-up shot of this. So you see how I can see the lines there and there. And you see how I eyeballed it to try to get that nice and centered up. All right, let's go ahead and sew this. Whenever you're sewing the units, the combined units together, for these, make sure that you chain piece. So you put a piece of scrap fabric in and move it down. And this is because we want to place this needle right in this little dip right here. So you see the V here? We're going to start sewing directly in that V. And that is going to line us up right along this line right here. So as you see, as I'm sewing straight, there's our line. So we're going to sew this right along the combined units. Do as I say, not as I do. Don't sew over your pins. It's a horrible habit that I do. And all the way out the other side. Now you notice the other side came out right at that V right there. So that is your goal. Don't take out your units yet because we're going to chain piece. If you want to know about chain piecing more, I've got a tutorial video down below that's linked. So you want to start right there, just like we did the other one. And sew all the way down along that line. And out the other V. Last but not least, we'll do the combined A and B. Same exact thing. You know what? Let's go this way. Yeah, I'm going to go this way. I like it with my lines to the right. So we're going to start sewing right into that V right there. All the way down. Right along those lines. And out. Now, in order to make sure that my seams are locked in, I'm going to take my scrap fabric and put it back in there. And then that's going to set me up for success for the next round that I do. Now, whenever we iron our units we just combined, we want to make sure that these seams are ironed open. But something that I've learned is it's a lot easier to take your paper out of the seams now before you iron it. So go ahead and do that. Go ahead and take your paper out just from the seams, not from anywhere else. Just this area right here. And if you have a little bit of paper that is, it's kind of difficult to come out. For example, I've got that little piece right there. That's what you use tweezers for. And just get in there with your tweezers and it'll pop the paper right out. And if you did, in fact, use a 1.6 for your stitch length, it should be a lot easier to pull the paper out than if you don't. Now, if you're struggling with getting the paper out, and if you're just using regular paper, you may want to invest in the foundation paper piecing paper. However, it's a little bit more expensive than regular paper. So I always suggest waiting until you know that you like foundation paper piecing before you invest in the better paper. I think I did, 4 or 5 different designs before I was hooked, and I was like, okay, let's buy it. And it really is worth it. This lighter paper is so much easier to get this paper out. It's so much nicer. As you can see, I haven't had to use my tweezers again because it just easily pulls right on out of there. All right, and the last but not least. Now, whenever you iron your seams open, we're going to do the same thing we did before. We're going to lock our seams in, and then I'm going to iron it in one direction, flip it open, hand press my seam open, and then I will sew it and lock it into place. So as soon as I get these last little bits, oh, I'm going to need my tweezers for that little tiny area. The smaller the area, the more likely you're going to need tweezers to get it out. So just like this. There we are. And it comes right on out. All right, let's go ahead and get my iron. And let's do that one first. So I'm locking my seam into place. I'm going to iron it in the one direction. Flip this over, hand open. Oops. Now, there are tools out there that you can use as well if you have problems opening the seam. I believe I'm going to link some down below, and then iron that open. There we are. And there is our combined E and F block. Same thing, we're going to do the same exact thing for the D, the combined C and D block, and the combined A and B block. There we are. And then flipping it over. Now, trust me, in my earlier tutorials, you'll see me doing this with the paper still in. It is so much easier. Just take the paper out of the seams and then iron your seams open. It is just, you're not going to struggle as much. It is just so much easier. Trust me. And that's something that I didn't see in any, I did the same thing. Look. This one's off a little bit. I didn't eye it up correctly. Man. Oh, yep, I see it. It's off. You know what? It's fine. It's a creative decision. I do not feel like fixing this. So this is a creative decision. Yes, I am using steam. Someone in the live chat asked if I was using steam. I am using steam. It is a lot easier to iron this and get this the way that I want it with steam in there. I mentioned that the iron may curl the paper, especially if you're using steam. It is fine. It's not, you're not going to damage anything. It's perfectly fine. Yeah, it's unique, right? All right, so now let's go ahead and sew together. Let's see, E, F, D, A, B. It goes this way. So I'm going to sew the combined A, B block to the combined C, D block. In fact, you know what? I'm going to do it this way. Let's eyeball it this way for centering. And then flip and pin. There. That is exactly where I want it. Do not move at all. Just move it back up here. There we go. And let's see if that works for centering. Just like that. All right, so let's do, I'm going to go ahead and sew this, iron this, pull the paper out. Well, pull the paper out, then iron. And then I'm going to combine it to this one, and then we'll come back and look at my finished block and see how it looks. And there it is. There is our shop block. Now, at this point, you want to finish removing all of your papers. After you finish removing all of your papers, at that point, you then want to trim your block to 6.5 inches by 6.5. But Tony, it's a 6 by 6 block. That's because the 6.5 by 6.5 includes your seam allowances. And our block is finished. And that's the syringe block. See, it's pretty easy to fit a foundation paper piece after you get the hang of it, isn't it? Thank you so much for joining me, and hopefully you learned how to make this block and you had fun doing it. Don't forget to like this video, follow my YouTube, as well as Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, my Quite Nerdy Quilters Facebook group, Twitch, where I also stream live. I have, Pinterest, TikTok, all the things. I have all of the social medias, all the things. Don't forget to like all that stuff. And thank you so much for joining me.